Hello and welcome to episode 9 of The Goal Difference. We are almost in double figures. Who would have thought it? Hello to any new listeners joining us today. And if you have recently joined the Goal Difference Club, I'm Lola, a Liverpool fan, and this is my twin sister Scarlett, a deluded Arsenal fan. What am I supposed to say to that? And this is a podcast about Arsenal, Liverpool, the rivalry between our two teams, but also the rivalry between us as twins. And we are identical twins, so we do sound very similar. And we will at all times try to use each other's names, but maybe a fun game for you listeners is to work out who is talking and when. Voice identification, Cluedo, that's the game. On today's episode, we are going to talk about the Lionesses, because where else would we start? How about those Lionesses, Scarlett? How about them, Lola? How about Misha Ajimang? You know what, Lola? I really enjoyed Seb Hutchinson's commentary.
Bronze. Now to send it in. Terrific ball. Goalkeeper spills it. Ajimang!
Somehow he's a lot more charming than Gary Neville, but we'll circle back to that on another episode. Anyway, let's start with the Lionesses. It's not been, it's very obvious and well documented at this stage that it's not been a vintage progression through the tournament for the team. They needed a shootout in the quarterfinals against Sweden. They needed 119 minutes to find the winner against Italy last night. Talk me through, what's your sort of overview of the tournament so far? Well, I think it's been a rocky road in, Lola, hasn't it? I mean, we've talked on this podcast about Millie Bright and Mary Earps not being part of the squad. And I think in many ways, Hannah Hampton has emphatically answered a lot of questions that weren't really raised by her around her inclusion as first choice, like coming to the fore in the shootout with a tampon up her nose, a really assured performance last night. And I really liked it. There was a moment before England equalised where I actually can't remember which Italy player it was, but they had a point blank chance in the box. And Hannah Hampton killed it and then made a double save. And as she came out with the ball, she was shoving the Italy players out of the way. And I just thought, yeah, she's got something in her. And I don't mean to say who needs Mary Earps, because we love Mary Earps, but I think she's really shown that she's got the personality to be successful in this Lionesses team. I think actually personality is the operative word here, because we haven't seen tons and tons of quality football. There haven't necessarily been those passages of play where you're like, yeah, wow, this is really clicking, like there was in 2022. But right the way through the team, there's proper personality. I mean, you look at Lucy Bronze still steaming up and down the right flank, deep into extra time, and her body is just some kind of miracle. She needs to be studied in a lab. I think there was an exchange in the Sweden game when she went down and started strapping herself up, apparently, according to Hannah Hampton, in Spanish with the referee, where the referee was like, "Are you a physio now?" And Lucy Bronze was like, in Spanish, "Yeah, I do everything." So she's a woman of many talents. Yes, she's a very cool lady. There has been turnover between the tournaments, huge characters like Jill Scott, who's now on everyone's TV screens all the time. She's retired. Ellen White's retired. Fran Kirby is not in the squad anymore. And these are girls that were around the team for long time. So there has been change. But who do you think has really stepped forward in this tournament for England? Yeah, I mean, Kelly, Ajimang. I mean, this is an old classic, but Lucy Bronze has been fantastic always. Or fantastically spirited, maybe not always fantastically footballing. Kira Walsh has been class. I was going to say, I know there's one player in particular whose performance last night you were purring about. Was I purring, Lola? You were sitting on the sofa purring, and that was Kira Walsh. And do you want to say a bit more about what you liked about that performance? I think, and what Kira Walsh does beautifully is just ride anything that comes her way and still find a way to find her teammates. I think she just looks like she has more time than everyone else. And definitely there was plenty of adversity last night for England. And it always felt like even when everything was going wrong for everybody else, Russo couldn't make the ball stick. Bronze's crosses were hitting the first man, Well, they weren't. They were going out of play. But I think what was interesting about Russo is that we're expecting Russo to hold it up really with her back to goal a lot of the time, or run onto hopeful passes. Russo's not a number 9 bully. And actually, when Aubameyang came on and had that physical advantage over the defence, she had that chance where she ran through and almost lobbed the keeper spectacularly. So there's something about the way this team is playing right now that isn't suiting the personnel initially. The subs are doing really well, but I think there's been this phrase bandied about in this camp, which is proper English. And I'm like, proper English doesn't mean you have to play bad football. We have to talk about the penalty shootout. I don't think we can, talk about the Lionesses actually without talking about that penalty shootout and about the fact that Chloe Kelly missed her penalty last night. And there's two schools of thought here. There's the misogynistic school of thought that, women aren't powerful enough to score penalties, which is kind of ludicrous, really, because female goalkeepers are much smaller. So there's more space to aim at if you take a good penalty. You can literally physically put it out of someone's reach. But anyway, we'll address that in a moment. But there has been a lot of human error in this tournament with all teams. With this tournament specifically, of the 15 spot kicks taken, only 5 were scored. I mean, that is a conversion rate of like 35%. That's not very high, and that's not normal. Why do you think that might be? I don't think it's just pressure that's making the Lionesses not play their best football. You have some players there who are still left over from the success of 2022, and you have some new characters blending in. And I suppose that's almost, again, comparable to the Euros run for the men last summer, where you had quite a lot of these new inclusions like the Whartons and the Ezes, who ultimately actually didn't play much football, mixed with kind of stalwarts of Southgate's previous success, if you want to call it that. And I think it will be interesting to see if Sarina Wiegman stays on past this cycle, because you do feel they're at the end of a cycle. And I think there are some players who have aged a bit. Alex Greenwood looked physically, I would say, a little bit suspect. I'm not sure they've got the balance right in the back four. And I was just thinking, like, who would have been there? Who was there when we won the Euros? And at left back, it was Rachel Daly, wasn't it? But I don't think we look super physically dominant. Whereas I think Italy looked a lot faster than us. They looked fresher. And then, maybe it is also just a personnel thing of like the team is changing around, the system maybe needs to change with that. Let's zoom in on the penalty issue for a moment, because obviously the winning goal last night was, we all thought it was going to be a Chloe Kelly trademark penalty goal, but it was saved. It wasn't even a bad penalty, really. It was just a bit obvious where she was going to put it. And that is probably my biggest takeaway from the penalty shootout the other night, was if you can see from the TV screen, if you can make a pretty good guess as to where you think the ball's going to go, then the goalkeeper, whose job it is to do that, is very likely to be able to. So what, in your mind, happened in that penalty shootout? And what happened to Chloe Kelly last night, someone who is famously good at taking penalties? Well, I think last night she just went in the opposite corner that she went in the last game. So I guess she kind of outthought herself, where she was like, I've got to go the other way. And the keeper just read it. In terms of the shootout, I think it was just catching the nerves and the pressure. And what an odd decision for Falk to nominate herself. Actually, I don't know if she did. We've seen it to great effect with Quiveen Kelleher in the League Cup final. Literally have no memory of that moment. It's the League Cup. He scored an amazing penalty. So insignificant. Anyway, just win a trophy. Well, it just shows how something so insignificant can be lauded over other fans. But it also shows how trophies stay with you forever, whereas top four finishes don't. Personally, Lola, I think it's quite tin pot. But anyway, winning trophies is tin pot. Okay, yep, listeners, note that. Being really excited about the League Cup is tin pot, and I think the listeners will agree. Anyway, back to the penalty shootout. I think it is that thing of once you see someone missing, I think they started thinking, oh God, I don't want to do that. And it was almost like a classic England penalty shootout of old. I was reminded of the Portugal one where we went out of the World Cup in Germany in 2006, where you just kind of knew, like when they were going up, that they did. And you felt similarly. I think the first Swedish taker just looked like she didn't have the bottle. But then the second Swedish penalty was unbelievable. Yeah, and Alessia Russo's penalty to start things off was like a very normal penalty, and then it all just kind of got really messed up in the middle. I do think there was an odd thing where they were kind of going, and apart from Lucy Bronze, who very clearly stated the kind of conventional wisdoms of sports science, where she was like, you're more likely to win if you go first, the keeper is more likely to move. So going down the middle is statistically likely you'll score. They were all really rushing. And I think when you take Chloe Kelly out of that, she has her routine and her hop that kind of anchors her and prepares her for what she's going to do and puts her into her rhythm. Whereas I felt everyone else really rushed it. And Lucy Bronze's penalty, despite scoring, was a nervous penalty. Well, going down the middle, you could argue, unless it's a Panenka, like maybe that is always a nervous penalty. But I did actually really like what she said about how not only is it generally a risk for a goalkeeper to stand still in a penalty shootout, on a penalty as crucial as that, you know, if you were a goalie, could you live with yourself if you stood still and someone's lost it either side? I think very unlikely. I want to move on a bit, which is just to say that in the 2015 World Cup, which I can't believe was 10 years ago, it's crazy, 84.4% of the penalties were scored. And that's compared to just 58% of the penalties at this Euro 2025. This does slightly go back to my theory about pressure, because let's be honest, back then, I think England got to the semi-final and I remember watching it, but the stadiums were pretty empty and there weren't nearly the number. There were millions watching on TV last night, and it's grown into a much bigger thing. So that has changed things for this group, because there now is pressure and expectation and media fallout if they don't go on to do what people expect them to do. Maybe it's that, but I think the women's game has grown with the attention on it. And, you know, everybody's playing with the same crowds. I think the crowds at this tournament have been noticeably really good and engaged. What I've loved about this tournament is the support is fanatical, but it is different from support at a men's match. And I really loved the Sweden fans singing "Lay All Your Love on Me" to their team. I mean, not just, you know, noisy, passionate support. It's a beautiful song, isn't it, Lola? It is. And okay, let's round off on the Lionesses. In a nutshell, in the briefest possible terms, can you tell me what you think is going to happen in the final on Sunday? Lola, I'll be honest with you, I think we'll lose to Spain. The one kind of shred of hope I have about it is the Champions League final, because a lot of the protagonists from both teams were involved in that. And I think no one gave Arsenal a shout, albeit Arsenal actually played some beautiful football this season under Rene Slagers, but, you know, Dutch manager. But looking at where the team are, you know, I think limping into a final against a high quality opposition, if you concede early against Spain and you hand them the initiative in the way that we've handed Sweden and also Italy the initiative in this competition, I just don't think you're coming back from that. I don't think you have that. I think once we scored, it was quite clear we were going to win in this game. Italy just looked absolutely broken, and people were saying that they over celebrated. Ooh, celebration police. Well, they celebrated in front of the English bench, which I think is just weird. Yeah, but also that they over celebrated their quarterfinals win. And people are saying, oh, that was as if it was their final. And I don't think England will have that aura against Spain. But, you know, we did beat them on the way to our Euro success in 2022. They didn't have Mateus, though, did they? They didn't. And they've just got an incredibly talented squad. So have we, to be fair. But I don't think we'll win. What do you think, Lola? Well, you know, logic obviously says that Spain will win. And I think there's been a line of thought running all the way through this competition that you'll put 16 teams onto the pitches in Switzerland and Spain will win. You know, they'll all play each other and Spain will win. So logic strongly suggests that Spain will win and they are the best team. And particularly with England not playing particularly well, that would feel very likely. But I'd give England half a chance, because when it's going wrong against Spain, which inevitably it will, they're not going to have a lot of the ball. They're going to be backs to the wall. Who knows, they might concede. Weird things have been happening that convince you that the ball could land at Michelle Adjamang's feet and she could score. You know, that they've got that kind of Real Madrid juju in the Champions League going on that just makes me think maybe they could get something. And I do think, in the way that we're talking about the Lionesses broadly as winners, when you have that Champions League final experience among the Arsenal contingent so recently against, you know, what is a club team largely populated by the Spanish national team, or vice versa, I think that will give them a massive amount of belief that, like, no matter what they have to suffer through, they can create those chances. And, you know, you saw it last night. Beth Mead came on and just seemed canny and calm in the final action, who won us that penalty. And in the Champions League final, it was substitutes that combined Beth Mead to Blackstenius that won us that game. And I think you could compare the Lionesses with the Arsenal squad with that depth and kind of not really knowing. I mean, we know who Serena Wiegmann will start, but we don't really know if it's the best players that start every game. Okay, well, all the best to the girls on Sunday night. And Scarlett, you'll be watching from sunny Greece, won't you? Yep. It's going to be an interesting blunt rotation for the final. I'll report back on the podcast how that goes, but rooting for the Lionesses, and we'll catch up about that, won't we, Lola? We will, Scarlett. Bring it home, girls. Come on. Let's move on to what I have said is my favourite topic, because this is proper. This is, for me, Scarlett, this is what the transfer window is all about. With this whole situation with Alexander Isak, I think in a strange way, it welcomes speculation because there's so much weird stuff happening, so many funny noises, that actually the only way to get to the bottom of it is to think about what's happening. So what I'm going to do to start this section is I'm going to give you a few bits of information, and it's going to be like a game, like Cluedo. And you are just going to tell me how you interpret those pieces of information. And then at the end, you're going to tell me how likely you think he is to leave Newcastle. And if he does leave Newcastle, where you think he's going to end up at the end of the transfer window. So let me just do the timeline in full. Okay, so approximately a week ago, we hear that Liverpool is serious about their interest for Isak and have made club-to-club contact and would offer 130 million if encouraged, that a bid might be accepted. And this is all while Newcastle are in the race for Ekitike. Liverpool go in, we get Ekitike. Ekitike's now had his medical in London, is on the way to Hong Kong. So wow, do things move quick nowadays. A few days later, Newcastle have a friendly against Celtic at Celtic Park, which they lost 4-0, lol. And have you seen that graphic that they posted? It's genuinely, please look it up, any listeners. It's the worst. Someone in their design team needs to get sacked. It's like embarrassing. Anyway, Isak was not with the squad, and Eddie Howe said, "It was my decision. I decided to send him home due to the speculation around him. We, as a staff, recognise his talent and ability. We are desperate to keep him as part of our team. It's difficult for me to sit here and give 100% clarity on any player. I'd never sit here and do that. It's football and you never know what can happen. All I can say is that Alex is happy at Newcastle. He loves the players and staff and the team. Yes, I've had discussions with him, but that's not abnormal. I respect a player's career and how short it is. Alex has been really good. He's trained really well. And I realise there'll be noise around him." And then a day later, his agent said, "We are indeed studying and analysing all options, and we may be close to finalising the next step for the player." All the while, two things are happening in parallel. One, Miguel Delaney briefs the press. Miguel Delaney writes an article that says Frankfurt have become frustrated at Liverpool dragging their heels over the Ekitike deal. And at that point, Victor Gyökeres was trapped somewhere in Luton in the back of a silver van and hadn't yet had the "here we go." And there was Arsenal fans saying that maybe they'd seen his hands in the new kit launch. It was all getting very weird. Since then, we've had a "here we go" for Victor Gyökeres. We've had a "here we go" for Ekitike. So both of those are happening. But it looks like neither Arsenal nor Liverpool are done in the transfer market. We've had rumours that Liverpool would go back into him. We've had rumours that his agent has been in contact with Arsenal. So with all that information on the board, Scarlett, please tell me, how do you interpret this? Where is he going to end up? Look, I held on to the embers of slight hopes all summer that potentially the reason why Arsenal's striker search was dragging on was because Arsenal were in the background looking at Isak. And I think you felt similarly. Obviously Liverpool looked like they might make an approach. Ultimately, I don't think they actually put an offer on the table because they were quoted something ridiculous by Newcastle. And you've now got Ekitike. So my theory, as of the present, which may change tomorrow when Man City put a £150 million bid, no, they won't. But my theory is just that basically he's trying to leverage this interest to get 300k a week. I think that's what I'm reading, that's the demand that's been made to Newcastle. And that would make the most sense to me, because would Liverpool really pay what looks like it will be upwards of 130 million, not 130 million, upwards, for a player that kind of breaks their transfer policy, turning 26 this season, a little bit injury prone, and yes, potentially a kind of like monumental level raiser, but a risk nonetheless. In answer to your question, yes. And to go back a step, the signing of Ekitike in my mind, does not mean that we cannot sign Alexander Isak. I've done some very conservative sort of back of a napkin maths, and we are looking at shifting Darwin Núñez for around the 70 million mark to Saudi, interestingly, and this whole Newcastle ownership becomes so foggy when you hear things about how the Saudis are unimpressed with our approach for Isak and therefore won't be bidding for Darwin after all. But, we're assuming he's on the way out. So that's Darwin for 70, Diaz for 70, Harvey Elliott out for, we think, in the 40 to 50 million pound region. Kostas Tsimikas, you think you get 10 million for him. Tyler Mawson, 15. There's even Ben Doak kicking around who you could get at least 24. So the point is we're looking at conservatively about 215 million odd in sales. This isn't about whether the money is available. I think the money is also available at Arsenal. There is 150 million pounds there. Arsenal are really PSR healthy and apparently were the most profitable club in the league last season. Apparently, I don't know. I don't think we really understand the intricacies of how these finances play out. So calculating the maths, in my opinion, is a little bit it's not going to get you anywhere. But the point is, that's not my question. My question is not, is the money there? My question is, would it be a departure from Liverpool's transfer policy to drop 150 million and what will surely be astronomical wages on a player who's older than the type of player they normally sign? They've signed the type of player they normally sign. They've signed Ekitike. Let me tell you why it's not. Because just like for Arsenal, Isak has been, probably since he moved to Newcastle and proved to be a good player, Isak has been the dream of the Liverpool recruitment team. So there's that. They've known the player for a long time. They like the player. He's been their choice for that position. Number two, everything in the Liverpool attack in the long term must be focused around replacing Mohamed Salah, who at some point, I hope this day never comes, but at some point he is going to not play for Liverpool and his output is going to drop. So I think that's where you get into the business of needing, how the hell do you replace Mohamed Salah? Lola, didn't you tell me that his biological age was 19 or something? Yeah, he's cryogenically freezes himself every summer to take years off his life. But yeah, take years off his life, add years to his life. But yeah, look, the truth is, as much as I wish he could, Mo Salah won't go on forever. So there's got to be succession planning there. So it's not a risk. It's actually a risk to not take, major action this summer. But I think it is a risk. I think it would have been and would still be, but looks unlikely to be, a risk for Arsenal to go there because this is a player who's apparently also training alone because of an injury concern. Whether we think that's true or not. Do you remember when Barcelona was sniffing around for Coutinho? It was the summer of 2017, and there was this mysterious back injury. My honest feeling on it is, as I've said, and I'll reiterate it, I don't think Isak is agitating for a move. I think he's
the training alone thing?
I think he's agitating for more money because I think he knows he's the star asset. Newcastle don't want to sell this summer. This summer, I think, would be the peak of his value. So it would be in Newcastle's interest to sell. But are you really going to spend, 90 million euros on Ekitike and he's not going to start? That's insane. You don't spend 90 million euros on a bench.
They start on the left.
Well, what about, I thought you were signing Rodrigo. Rodrigo would be 75 million pounds on the bench.
But okay,
who are you?
No, hold on a second, Scarlett. Hold on a second. What you have to understand about our forward situation is that Slot likes to play with 5 and a 6th that may be a kid or a Chiesa, right? We will be selling Darwin Núñez, we'll be selling Luis Diaz. Due to tragic events, we're without Jota. So that's 3 forwards that played, Diaz and Jota both played most of the minutes starting for Liverpool last year, apart from the period in which Jota was injured. So we signed 1 forward. Wirtz, who I thought would be signed to play in the front 3, has actually been signed to play in midfield. Sure, he'll cover there. If someone got injured, he'll play there. But they've primarily bought him to play number 10. So what are you going to do? Are you going to start the season with Gakpo, Salah, and Ekitike as your only forwards? They have to sign 1, maybe 2 more. Well, I think that depends on whether Luis Diaz leaves. And at the moment, it looks like Liverpool are playing hardball with Bayern and doing very well because they seem to be about to get really good money for him. But Liverpool have said he's not for sale. So you just don't want Diaz to be there next season. But Scarlett, I actually would. I think Diaz is not Sadio Mane, which is very unfortunate that Mane was his predecessor, but he's been a brilliant player for us. You're underestimating the importance of this summer, both in terms of bodies in the building, in terms of the fact that we now, if you're assuming that Nunes has gone, which we are, and that Diaz is likely to follow, that we only have 3 senior forwards in the squad, and Ekitike hasn't officially joined yet. So, in my opinion, Liverpool have to do 1, maybe 2, and they've got the massive question mark hanging over them of they've got to replace Mo Salah. And you'd rather replace Mo Salah while he's still wearing the shirt than when he's not.
Yeah, and I've heard this and seen this coming out of Liverpool Twitter. Like, it's really smart because there's going to be an international tournament next summer, and that's why it's so amazing that we're doing our rebuilding now. And like Gerrard's like, fix the roof while the sun's shining. Sure, there's definitely wisdom that you should 100% use your position as Premier League champions, because probably not going to last, as a moment where you can attract the best players. My question is not even, it's a long-term question, which I think you're also concerned about. It's whether Isak is the person to rebuild around, because he is in his peak years. And that doesn't seem to me like the usual Liverpool strategy to go and sign a peak years player if you're trying to ensure your future. That's why the Ekitike signing makes more sense.
But like we don't know exactly who's been earmarked to replace who. But if Isak is the Darwin replacement, then that's just an upgrade. That's just a basic upgrade.
Lola, I simply feel this is mental gymnastics. Like, I don't think Isak is joining Liverpool. Okay. I think he's trying to get more money.
Well, look, so that's your theory. Your theory, Scarlett, is that Alexander Isak is agitating to get 300k a week, and that you think eventually Newcastle will cave to that demand.
Yeah, I do. I think Newcastle want to keep their prized asset, and at the moment, which striker have they got in?
No one. They're
So,
trying to get. They tried with Ekitike,
and it looks like they may go in for Sesko.
They're looking at Wissa, but
that they did for Wissa, and Wissa is not going to replace Isak. He's not, and they need to replace Callum Wilson. So I think Newcastle have made their decision. I think they've made that and they've made their bed, and they're kind of hoping that he has a good season and they can sell him next summer, because they'll have to, or he'll be locked into a new contract, preserving his value for better money.
Do you want to ask me what I think, Scarlett?
What do you think is going to happen, Lola?
I think Newcastle are in a really complicated position. We know they have had major PSR issues in the last year.
They don't have the same issues now they've qualified for the Champions League, Lola.
But that's not quite true. They have not been able to secure. Newcastle have missed out on, I think, 5 transfer targets.
That's not a PSR issue.
Yeah, but they can't push the bids to Newcastle have got priorities across the squad, right? They have to make changes across the squad. As you said, they've got to replace Callum Wilson. They've got to sign another forward on top of that. They need to buy a centre-back urgently, and they need a goalkeeper. And they haven't got any new signings through the door apart from Anthony Elanga, who you think they overpaid for. So they are in a situation where they could do with 3 or 4 new players, and they don't have significant funds or pull at the moment to make that happen. So there's that. There's also the simple fact that if he is as unsettled as, the comments from Eddie Howe and his agent suggest, then you might just be better off going into the season and not having that player.
But this is what happens. Like, don't be naive. This is what happens when players try and get more money.
This is the second summer in a row that he's been in this situation, Isak.
But if you're Alexander Isak, you can leverage other clubs' interests.
But they can't pay. What Newcastle can't do is pay the wages and make the signings.
Yes, they would be breaking their wage structure. But I think, I don't know, this is the thing. Football finances are so opaque. I don't think we know whether they can do that.
No, but they can't afford to pay Alexander Isak £300,000 a week and then also sign a bunch of players across the squad.
Lola, I don't think you know that.
I do.
But this is semantics. The point is, you think Isak's going to Liverpool.
It's not even about necessarily going to Liverpool. This comes back to my concerns about him potentially going to Arsenal, Chelsea even. Because you never know Chelsea will just keep buying players until the end of time. And who knows, they might even sell Liam Delap to Man City for a profit within this window. They might do something crazy. The point is, I think there's a certain point where you cross the Rubicon. And I think Alexander Isak has passed that point. He's 26, he's turning 26. Eddie Howe's made this comment about the shortness of his career. Eddie Howe is struggling to get players in. Frankly, if I'm Eddie Howe, It's like Liverpool with Coutinho. Sometimes you have to sacrifice your best player to rebuild the team. Newcastle could go and sign 4 really good players with the budget they have available plus Isak money. So I think he goes.
Okay, well, I think you're doing some quite intense mental gymnastics there, Lola.
That's your favourite phrase. Okay, well, I'm going to make a bold prediction to round off today's episode, including my sort of semi-prediction that the Lionesses are going to find a dark magic way to beat Spain. But my bold prediction is that by the time of recording of our next episode, Liverpool will have made a formal offer for Alexander Isak.
Keep dreaming, Lola.
You've got to dream.
It's gone straight to her head, all this money.
You've got to have dreams.
You're a big club. Liverpool, a big club. Yeah.
Can you hear how rattled she is?
Big club, Liverpool.
My God. I'm really worried about Scarlett, guys. Off air, I'm going to get her a coffee and some iced water. Okay, we've got one more item on our agenda, and it's Scarlett can't wait for this. She can barely sit still. We are going to talk about your T-shirt, aren't we, Scarlett? Tell me what you're wearing and why.
You know what? I wish it was a sporting shirt, Lola, because
you have a sporting shirt.
I do.
It's really nice.
I don't know where it is as of the current time of recording. I am wearing a bootleg Arsenal fan T-shirt from, I believe, 1987.
What does bootleg mean?
I just think it's not official club merchandise.
I just think we have to clarify that because it's a word you've used before, and I think
I think that's just a term, Lola. But anyway, bootleg T-shirt depicting Arsenal's run to the 1987 League Cup final against Liverpool, which I believe we lost.
So you're wearing a trophy, a T-shirt representing a trophy run to a final that you lost.
I mean, it's quite funny actually, because obviously you were making your tin pot comments earlier, and I was trying to think, why am I wearing this T-shirt? Why am I wearing this T-shirt? Why am I wearing this T-shirt? And what I'll say to you, as the season rolls around, there's a little bit too much noise for my liking that Arsenal are at last chance saloon and that we have to win now. And what I'm depicting on my T-shirt is a journey to, well, I don't remember this event. Any Liverpool fans really remember the 1987 League Cup final?
I suspect your mother would.
Call it mental gymnastics.
Oh my God, we're back on the gymnastics.
But I think my point is, let's remember and let's enjoy this season and try and take the pressure off winning, because I think we're there. I think it can happen, but it might not. And you might still get very close again and it might not happen. And I'm finding the new stick that rival fans and the press are beating us with of the bridesmaid thing so tiresome and boring. Look where we are now and look where we were 5 years ago. We may well win the League Cup this season, and then I'll be remembering it as the start of the end of our trophy drought.
You're sounding a hell of a lot like someone who hasn't won a trophy for a long time.
Well, it's not been that long, but the point is, I don't think it's just about trophies, and I'd like us all to remember that and not be so feverish. Like, we're doing really well. This is really good.
We're doing really well, I promise. I'm really happy. I swear.
Well, I just think this is the mark of a proper fan who's like willing to praise the club when they're not doing exactly what I want to do, which is win a trophy.
Okay, well, let's leave Scarlett with the last word there. And thank you very much for listening this week. And come on, the Lionesses.
Thank you, listeners. Bye-bye.